Well, there ought to be a place for a good amen about there somewhere, I think. That's great. Thank you so much. What we're doing today is remembering. I've tried to figure out how you can put 120 years into 40 minutes. But I have this agreement with myself. At 9:30, I'm going to quit, wherever we are in the sermon. So pay close attention, would you? Now, Psalm 77 tells us why we're here. Psalm 77 is a wonderful psalm. The psalmist is expressing a lot of challenges. He starts off by talking about he has sought the Lord in the day of his trouble. So he's having some trouble. The trouble he's having trouble wondering if God's going to be faithful to all that he's done. Is he going to keep his covenant promise? Is he going to keep his word to us? Can we trust him? Is character real, and can we trust his? And then the resounding answer is yes, we can. We can trust him, even in the midst of trouble. And so here's what he says in this Psalm 77. Lord, I will remember your works. Yes, I will remember your ancient wonders. I will reflect on all you have done and meditate on your actions. Now tie that to Malachi chapter 3 and verse 16, which says that the people who loved the Lord and who believed in his name came together and talked to one another, and the Lord listened and heard them, and a book of remembrance was written before him. You see, what's happening is we're remembering today. God is also keeping a book of remembrance. He's remembering what we're reminding him of today. And that's what we want to look at, just celebrate what the Lord has done in this place. I really am relieved, because I thought John wanted me to cover from 1904 to today. And I had 37 pages of things written down. And I said, I don't know about this, how this is going to work. So I called him and said, exactly what are you wanting me to do? He said, I just want you to reminisce about when you were here. He said, on the 8th, we're going to remember everything. And so, but I can't just start with when we came, because this church started in 1904. And I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Elisha Adam Eulis, native of Tennessee. Came to Texas in 1867, bought 170 acres of land somewhere around North Main Street and Euless Boulevard. That means this could have been part of what he bought right here, 170 acres. There was nothing here. It was just prairie. Euless had a population of 20, Euless community. Wasn't anybody here. There wasn't a church. There was a community hall called the Hall, and the Methodist and Presbyterian alternated Sundays meeting at the community hall, but there was no church building. So he built a cotton gin, and he built the community center, built the hall, became one of the prominent centers, and actually was elected Tarrant County Sheriff in 1892 and 1894. So he's a very prominent citizen. He's the one that we have named this city after. The people, as they began to develop here and as crowd began to grow, they began to name the city for the community, Euless community. And now you might be interested to know that Euless was not incorporated into a city till 1953. So when this was incorporated, this was just open land. It was just a lot of prairie, lush Texas prairie. And on March the 26th, 1904, now I'm not going to stop here to address this because I don't know the answer to this. Why are we celebrating something that happened on March the 26th on September the 1st? Brother John will have to explain that to us, but I'm sure there's a reason. But anyway, it was on March the 26th, 1904. On a Saturday night meeting, 12 people met at the house of Charles Fitch. Some of the Fitches are still in our church today. There was no city here. There was no paved roads here. It was halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth. There was no Trinity High School, no Trojan Trail, no airport freeway, no church building, no houses, just open prairie, pasture land. That's where this was in 1904. Well, immediately when the church organized, they sent 2 messengers to the Tarrant Baptist Association. So they began to link with the denomination in July after they founded themselves in March of that year. And they've always, by the way, they also did their first revival less than 2 weeks after they constituted. And they also voted to build the first building in 2 weeks after they constituted. So it was aggressive people. They loved the Lord, and they wanted to start a Baptist church out here on the prairie between Dallas and Fort Worth. It's always been a generous church. Their first year budget was $16.25, including $11.25 given to Buckner's Home and to the local association. Generous church, always is. Today, we have moved from giving that $11.25 on that first year to giving over $1 million a year to missions. Now, that's been the heartbeat of this church over this all this period of time. It's been a flexible church. In 1922, they needed to enlarge the facilities, so they tore down the original building that was less than 15 years old and built a new building with space for 200 people. The building was completed on Thanksgiving Day, debt-free. Then the Great Depression came along, 1929. At that time, Euless had 138 members. The community of Euless had 50 residents. We had more members than we had residents in this area. The Depression came. And 1931 was not a good year. 1929, the Depression came. 1931, there was a church split. And the pastor deliberately split the church over theological issues, and they spun off and formed what was called Westridge Baptist Church, then later Oakwood Terrace Baptist in South Euless. So the church faced a split right in the middle of the Depression. And it was a hard time for the church. In 1935, the membership dropped to 40 members. But in 1939, the church voted to go full time. Up until that time, it's been a quarter time and half time church, once a month or twice a month. And Southwestern Seminary came to Fort Worth in 1910, so most of the pastors after that, between 1910 and 1939, were seminary students. And in fact, they had 16 pastors from 1904 to 1939. They just didn't keep pastors long. In fact, they had been together almost 50 years when the first pastor stayed 5 years. And then it was another gap in about 10 years, and another pastor stayed 5 years. Then 1965, and we'll get back later, when Bill Anderson came, he stayed 10 years, which was a pivotal time for this church. And I'll say more about that a little bit later. But the church has always been a church that was aggressive. It was flexible. They called Malcolm Stewart to be the first full-time pastor. He was a single guy. Interestingly enough, he and my dad were both in seminary together. So we'd known the Stewart family all the way back to my earliest years. My earliest memories are of Southwestern Seminary. And Dad came when I was about 2 years old. And incidentally, Malcolm Stewart's son, Malcolm Jr., and my brother were classmates in Ouachita. So we've had a long relationship with the Stewart family. He was a remarkable young man, single, energetic, visionary. Didn't stay single long. He fell in love with a missionary who was on furlough, and she was a missionary to China. So he was committed to go to China. In fact, he stayed here until the Foreign Mission Board approved him to go to China. They did have a problem. Second World War was raging. They couldn't go to China. Now get this. They had to go to Hawaii. So they ended up in Hawaii. That was part of the Foreign Mission Board at that time. So they were foreign missionaries in Hawaii. and spent most of their ministry there in Hawaii. Both their sons were born in Hawaii. But he did a great job. His ministry was short here, just a brief time, about 2 years. But he set the stage for much of what is happening today. And we owe an eternal debt of gratitude that he launched the church with an expanded vision of global ministry. 1947, the church grew to over 200. By 1951, over 300. 1952 receipts were the first time they received over $10,000. Another split came, 1956. Yet the church grew in every area of its life. All the challenges, just think of the challenges this church faced. World War I had destroyed the confidence that existed in the world when the century changed to the 20th century. The World War I destroyed not only the global optimism, it destroyed postmillennialism at the same time, which is the belief that everything's going to get better till the Lord comes. Well, we know that's not true. But anyway, then you had all of the depression. There was a global depression. It was not just a United States depression. It was a global depression. You had all the facets of the depression. Then there were church splits, and through all of this, the church kept growing. Amazing! It truly is a miracle of God, and we truly celebrate what God has done when we are here this morning looking back over these last 120 years. In 1956, they called Glenn Hilburn, and that was right after the split. And Glenn Hilburn was here 5 years and did a marvelous job to stabilize the church and get them back on their feet. And when he left, he went to teach at Baylor University. Then G.H. Surratt came in 1961. And he did a splendid job. Under his leadership, they bought this property. They moved to this place where we're now located. And he did a wonderful job in expanding the vision and looking forward to the future. And when he left, he went to teach at Southwest Baptist College in Bolivar, Missouri. So we had two pastors, excellent pastors, who actually left here to go and teach at Baptist colleges. And they did a great job here. I wish I had time to tell you everything G.H. Surratt. G.H. Surratt was working on his doctorate. He was a BSU director at Weatherford College. He was the director of missions for the Parker Baptist Association and working on his doctorate degree all at the same time. Incessant worker. One member commented that he was the hardest working pastor they had ever seen. And so anyway, the staff began to enlarge in 1960. Benny Mayo was the first staff member to come to the church. He came as a combination minister of music and youth, and he was followed with the same description of job description by Charles Baldwin and Don Wilkins. And these three men actually guided the church through those years in the 1960s. Now, in 1962, Texas Highway Department decided they wanted to buy some land. Well, I didn't tell you that back in the 1904 to 1939, the church had 4 different names and changed locations twice. So it was always a flexible church. Last year, by the way, we changed to the 5th name. So some people are concerned about what you call the church. Well, it's had 5 different names, and it's been at 3 different locations. So it's a flexible church that has responded to the challenges. And here was the challenge. The highway department, we now are on North Main. They'd moved from Camden was the first name of the church. Then it was Tarrant, and then it was Euless. And they changed the name to Euless when they moved the property to where North Main and Highway 183 is today on the southwest side of that. Southwest side of that intersection. Church had some land there, and the highway department was going to enlarge the highway, and so they wanted to buy our land. And so that began a process. I wish I had time to tell you. It's an interesting process, but of getting the highway department to settle and let us buy the property. As you know, anything that the government does is rarely quick. And we had to prod them a little bit. They said it might take 4 or 5 years to settle the purchase of that property. So the church did an interesting thing. The deacons recommended that they not move and build a 1,000-seat auditorium. It's amazing, a miracle. The highway department decided to settle the sale, and we bought the property from the highway department. That was an interesting time for us. June 1963, the church officially purchased that 8.2 acres of land, choice land right here where we're located today. And the church had such vision for what was going to happen. Do you know, back before they moved here in 1954, in a master plan, the plan for this church was to build buildings to take care of 1,500 people. Amazing. It was still country, pasture land at that time, running about 300. And they planned to build a building for 1,500. What an amazing journey it has been. And then came Malcolm Stewart and Hilburn and Surratt. And in 1950, the population of this community, Euless community, was estimated at about 200 families. 1950, 200 families. By 1965, that had increased to nearly 16,000 people. In 15 years, it had an explosion of population, and the church grew rapidly, as you might imagine. Then emerged Bill Anderson. Now, you need to know Bill Anderson. Many of you do not know him, but many of you are here when he came in 1965. I've always said that when Bill Anderson walks in a room, you know everything's going to be okay. That's just the way he is. Now, I've known him for 70 years. We've been close friends all that time. Wherever we were, we stayed in touch. Our daughters roomed together in Baylor. So I know Bill Anderson real well. He has bugged my life a lot. He recommended me here. So if you want to blame somebody for me coming here, it's Bill Anderson. He recommended me to the committee, said he's just preaching over in Dallas for Dr. Criswell. Had the privilege of preaching 150 sermons over there while I was there preaching on Sunday nights and when he was gone, when the pastor was gone. And so they did, and we came. And then when I'd been in Nashville 15 years, well, 14 actually, he called me and said, "Hey, bro." I always hated to hear that, "Hey, bro," because I knew something was going to happen that might be uncomfortable. He said, "It's time for you to retire. I'm over here retired, and you need to come home." Well, I did retire, but I did give a year's notice, so I didn't come immediately. But I told him when he told me I needed to retire, I said, "Well, you've been telling me what to do for 30 years, so I might as well do it, you know." But Bill Anderson is the most unassuming pastor that I have ever known. A dear friend. We've walked a lot of territory together. He came here. I believe Bill Anderson's pastor was the pivotal chapter in the history of this church. It was Bill that pulled all the pieces together. When he preached, it was an icy, cold day. 10 editions when he preached in View of a Call. And he had at that time the longest pastorate in the history of the church. Now, our pastor now has transcended that by 8 years, and we're very grateful for that. But Bill Anderson is a remarkable individual. In fact, when John Metter came and preached in View of a Call, he would not come until he had talked to Bill and me. I don't blame him. I wouldn't go to a church that had 2 former pastors without at least checking their temperature. So while we were vetting him, he was vetting us. He flew down here. Bill and I spent a day with him, had lunch with him in the afternoon, and we liked what we saw. We promised him then, promise him now, we'll be his biggest cheerleaders. We love John Metter. Thank God for him. And we are so glad that he allows us two former pastors to stay around. We told him, said, we'll do anything you want us to do. We won't do anything you don't want us to do. We'll be your biggest cheerleaders. And we've had a great time together. And Brother John, thank you. We love you and Kim so very much. Well, in 1975, we came to Euless. I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the things. That's what he wanted me to do. And I said all that, and I've got almost 20 minutes left. Okay, we might make it. We began on November the 23rd. We were called on October the 26th. And things moved quickly. And the years we were here were exciting years because they were all growing years. For over 10 years, we increased over 10% a year in everything. And that's amazing. Finances, membership, all of that, 10% a year. It was a great time. And the first thing we began was in the spring of 1976, we began the intercessory prayer ministry. Now, if you want to know what I think was the key to this church over the last 120 years, it was the whole matter of prayer. This is a praying church. And we started the intercessory prayer room. We had an empty room down here on the end of what was A building, and it opened on the Trojan Trail. There was a room, very small room, but we had a prayer room there. And we had a big rally on a Wednesday night to launch the prayer ministry. Ron Dunn preached. Ron's always one of my favorite preachers, but he preached and he did a great job. It poured down rain. I don't mean just a little bit. It was torrential rain. We could not even dismiss the service because the raining was just blinding rain was coming down. But I always thought that the Lord said it took that long for us to get 180 hours of a week committed of people coming to the prayer room. And when the rain stopped and when we left, we did have every hour of every day, every week covered for someone to be in the prayer room. It was amazement to the police department. It was not unusual in the middle of the night when our people came. I came at 9 o'clock on Saturday night, so I saw it myself. There'd be a police car outside because they knew the danger of coming out and being anywhere at the middle of the night. And we always felt like they want to just give us some assurance that we're here, we know it's dangerous, and we're proving what you're doing, but thank you so much. But the intercessory prayer ministry was remarkable, and it is truly, nothing I could tell you could have happened without the Lord's mighty works in this place. This is a forgiving church. There have been things happen in this church that would have split most churches and destroyed them. We moved right through it. One church in town was formed out of a split in 1931. When that church got in trouble in the 1970s, this church stepped in, assumed their debt, and revitalized the church. We had a similar thing happen at another church in this city, a little different circumstance, but then they needed help to be revitalized. It was this church that had given members to that church in its beginning. It's been always a forgiving church, a flexible church. It didn't mind changes. It's had a passion about global. While doing excellent local ministries, it also had a global vision that remains true today. In January of 1977, we started the evangelism explosion training and had over 200 people trained on Tuesday nights. Even hosted an evangelism explosion national conference for pastors and leaders every year to come and be trained in EE evangelism work here at our church. And about the same time, the women's ministry was energized again. Carol Ann began talking about and helping bring about women's luncheons and women's retreats. And it was not too long after that, well, it was actually maybe about in the early 80s, we began to offer to men and women Kay Arthur's precept Bible teaching. We're in our 40th year of that now, and it's been a great ministry. Thousands of women have been revived and have been matured in their faith through the teaching of Kay Arthur, who, by the way, is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. John was her pastor before he came here, and I wish I had time to talk to you about Kay. One of her first rallies that she had, national rallies, was here in this church, and so that's always been a big part. 1977, also something happened that might go unnoticed to most people, but we added Dr. Bill Bell to our staff. Now, I wish I had time to tell you all the stories, but Dr. Bell was teaching at Dallas Baptist University. He was chairman of the religion department, and he went every weekend somewhere across the state to teach Sunday school teachers how to teach the lesson the next Sunday. And one day I saw him and I said, Dr. Bell, how much money do you make traveling on the weekends to teach Sunday school lessons? He said about $10,000 a year. I said, well, I want to ask you something. If we pay you $10,000 a year, will you just not travel and stay with our church? He said, I will. And so I said, well, what do you want to be called? He said, resident theologian. So we had our resident theologian. I can't tell you how much help he was to all of us. Taught our teachers, taught a Sunday school class. If I needed anything, I didn't have to go to a commentary or somewhere else. I'd call Dr. Bell. And I'd say, Dr. Bell, I'm on this particular subject. I need to know this. Can you help me? By Wednesday night, he would bring me a tape that he just sat at his desk and recorded. And it would save me 10 hours of work just listening to that 15-minute tape. He was a genius and highly respected. And Dallas Baptist University escaped much of the turmoil that existed during the conservative resurgence because people knew Dr. Bill Bell, a great friend and encourager. And we are so grateful for the time we had with him. Now, I have to tell you about one thing, and that is, we're going to have to hurry. We did one thing that was really off the chart and out of the box. Tony Dyer was our youth director, and he came to me one day and he said, I want us to rent Six Flags. I said, you what? He said, they don't open until after Easter every year in the spring. They're closed till then. I want us to rent Six Flags on Friday night before they open on Sunday and have Christian Family Day. Never had been done. Well, won't tell you all the details, but there were a lot of risk involved in that. But Tony and I went to visit with Six Flags. We told them what we wanted. We said, we want to come in and we want to take over the park. You provide personnel for the rides and for meals and everything that your personnel do. We'll do everything else. We'll take all of the venues where people produce music or sing music or whatever, and we'll put Christian singers in there, and we'll take care of all that. Our people will take the offering, the money, not the offering, but paying for at the gate for the people who walk up, and we'll take care of that and give that. We'll take the funds, and they said, well, you can charge $5 for a ticket, and you can add $2 to cover your expenses. We'll take $5 and you take $2. Oh, and they said, you have to guarantee us $50,000. I never did tell the church. But I signed a contract for $50,000 with Six Flags, which meant that we had to have 10,000 people in the park the day of the Christian Family Day if we were going to pay them, let alone cover the cost that we had with all the singers and everything. Well, happily, it was a wonderful celebration in our home when on Tuesday night, the long-range forecast said it was going to be a beautiful summer day on Friday. We gave him a standing ovation right there in our living room. And so Friday came. We did have over 10,000 that first time. The next 2 years, we had over 15,000. The fourth year, they gave us the second day, let us come back on Saturday. We had 39,000 through the park. By then, Six Flags, who are not a nonprofit organization, realized that we were into something. We started it. They took it over and put it in every one of their theme parks all across the United States. We started it. They liked it, made money. They wanted the money. They would not rent it to us after the 5th year. And so they took it away from us. But it was a wonderful experience. We had people saved. We were free to preach in the streets. We were preaching gosh, so much I'd like to tell you about that. But anyway, it went well. And but that was an exciting time for us to have the Christian Family Day at Six Flags. Now, in 1980, we had a financial crisis, as did many businesses across the country. And we started a 3-story educational building, and it was completed miraculously. And we wanted to get a loan to pay for it, but the banks wanted a 5-year bank record. And we did not have what they wanted, and so we couldn't give them that. But we had bought this property, and I don't have time to tell you how with that. That was a miracle in itself. But we bought the property, and but we had to pay for it. And the bank wanted a 5-year record in a certain form before they would let us borrow the money to pay for the property itself. And the 13 acres was sitting. We're in where that 13 acres was. There were 13 acres between us and the freeway. Nobody really knew who owned it or what the condition of it was, how to buy it. But we finally found who owned it, and it was a joint venture owned by a Jewish lawyer in Fort Worth named Arthur Ginsberg. So we went to visit with Mr. Ginsberg. Terry Barber and I did. Terry's our business administrator. And he offered to sell us this property for $969,000. We shook hands and said, we'll buy it. Now, that's important because a few days later, he called me and he said, what are you going to do with that property? I said, well, we're going to use it for church expansion. He said, okay. He said, I have an offer for $1.5 million right now for it. But he said, I shook your hand on $969,000. And he sold it to us for $969,000, even though it cost him $500,000. That's how we got this property. Amazing thing that God did to give that to us. I wish I had time to go into all the details. He wanted a letter of credit. Well, how do you get a letter of credit when you don't have any credit? Well, it just happened that our bank here was an associate bank of the Mercantile Bank in Dallas, and guess who was chairman of the loan department for commercial loans at Mercantile? Was the chairman, Ray Gregory, chairman of First Baptist Church over in Grand Prairie. I called Ray and said, can you get us a letter of credit? He said, it's done. I'll get it for you. Miracle that he got a letter of credit. And miracle that Ginsberg gave us the property, though it cost him $500,000. So many miracles involved in us getting this property. And we're so grateful for that. Oh, one of the miracles was that on December the 17th of 1978, we asked the church to give us a large gift above everything else for a down payment, and that one Sunday they gave $146,000. Church has always been a generous church, always willing to change. We had a remarkable music ministry when Robert and Nita Wagner came in 1981. By 1988, there were 1,250 people in the music program of this church, plus a choir that we had started for the third worship service that we had. Nita led the children's choir, wrote songs, orchestrations, did it all. Wonderful time, remarkable with the leadership of Robert and Nita. Counseling ministry started in April 1981. Ted Grosbeck, who had a doctor's degree in counseling, came from an administration position in Big Ten school, and he began to offer counseling, and out of that came Christian Counseling Associates. We had multiple associate counselors in about 4 years. We had 2 missionary homes in 1982 to give a place for missionaries to stay. Sometimes we'd have reservations made 2 years in advance. It was so popular to have that for us. I was president of the Southern Baptist Conventions in 1982. I don't have time to tell you all about that, but I told the deacons first that I'd been asked to be nominated as president, and said, but it's not my decision, it's our decision, because it'll require so much of me to be traveling between Sundays. I won't miss many Sundays, but if I'm elected, it'd be a pretty demanding schedule. Harold Samuels was chairman of the deacons at that time. He said, would you mind going home? So I left the deacons, which is always a scary thing. And, but in a couple of hours, they came out with a beautiful letter that basically said, we'll step in the gap, we'll fill in the slots when you're gone, and we'll take care of things if you're elected. During my presidency, we had over 2,000 additions to the church. You can imagine. I was gone through the week. It wasn't because of me. It's because, as it's always been, the church has always been full of faithful believers who just did what needed to be done. That's the way it's always been. And in those 2 years, we had not only did we have 2,000 additions, we had a big hole in the ground out here on the east side for 5 years that we started a building and had to stop it. That building was completed while I was president of the convention, while I was gone. I mean, it was an interesting time, but I want you to know that I would not have even presented my name as president of the convention if the deacons have not said, we'll take care of it. And they did. And that's remarkable. By the way, they started moving away from any kind of reporting of what's happening at church to ministry teams. And their deacons' meetings consisted of the ministry teams just sharing what was going on in their ministry, which is the way it's still organized today. It's a great group, and I am so grateful for that. I have to tell you about the call of Charles Thornton. Charles Thornton came into my office one day, and he said, Pastor, I believe that I need to quit my job and go to, God's called me to ministry. I said, well, don't quit your job yet. Let's talk about this. He said, it's too late. I've already quit it. He said, but I'm okay. I've got some savings. So he began to volunteer as a volunteer associate evangelism director. When Mike Foster left in 1983, he just stepped in and was the interim minister of evangelism. Now, the Personnel Committee knew about this, but we didn't go through the Personnel Committee. On a Sunday night, with a crowd just about like this, maybe a little more, I said, you all know Charles Thornton. You know his character, you know his witness, you know his faithfulness. All of you in favor of just making him our minister of evangelism, would you stand up? Well, the crowd just erupted in cheers. Everybody it was a hallelujah moment. Don't know anybody else ever got called that way. Didn't have a personnel committee, didn't have a deacon recommendation. Just everybody stood up and said, let's call him. And this church enjoyed 25 years of tremendous ministry from Charles and Pat. And you need to be praying for him right now. He's under some very severe physical problems at this time. But 1984, and I'll have to stop with this, we started our Crisis Pregnancy Center. I preached a sermon in January on, I called Death, the Abortion of America, the Death of America. And it just sparked a concern among our membership. Several of the members began to meet with Charles Thornton, Gary Phillips, and pray about what we could do. They were praying one night about it, and a man came they had never seen, and they never saw him again, who had 2 adopted children and was so much opposed to abortion. And he said, I can't help with my time because I have my job, but he gave him a check for $2,500. Tom Vandergriff, Democrat House member in Washington, sent us $5,000. And before long, this group came and said, we need to start a crisis pregnancy center. And 7 months later, after that sermon, the Crisis Pregnancy Center started. And it's been a remarkable thing. Wish I had time just to talk to you about. We've seen 38,000 babies born from women who came through that. Now, to give you an idea, that's a little bit more than the population of Weatherford. It's a huge thing. And it's been a great thing. Betty Crumpler was the first director. We owe so much to Betty. Michelle Gregory now leading that. And I could go on, but my time is out. I'm going to tell you I'd quit, and I will. There's so much more. But I just want to thank you. This church has always been a church of visionary people. You've loved your staff and your pastors. You've followed the leading of the Holy Spirit, and you've gotten us to where we are today. Who would have thought that we could have emerged from COVID with a $20 million building completely paid for, above budget and everything? And we stand today debt-free. And I'll make this statement. I won't explain it. I think the church is healthier today than it has ever been. Brother John, thank you. We love you. You've given us 18 years, and we pray you'll have many more. The Lord will let you be with us. But we remember these things, and a book is being remembrances written before God about what we're talking about. So we're remembering it here. He's recording it there, and we're grateful. Father, thank you for your love and grace. Thank you for just letting us be a part of what you've done. What a remarkable church. What a resilient people. What a visionary, faithful, devoted church family it is. And we're not here because we were smart. We weren't smart enough to do what's been done. We weren't good enough to make it happen. If it happened because of you, and we praise you and thank you for what you have done, the mighty works you have done, and we remember it with gratitude today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Before I dismiss you, thank you so much, Jimmy Draper. Thank you, Bill Anderson. I'll tell you everything Jimmy said about Bill and about himself serving here and helping me is absolutely true. It's been the joy of my life to serve with these two giants and to stand on their shoulders in so many ways. And we hope to highlight that story even more next week. I'm happy to have sat there for another hour, brother. I want you to know most of us in the room feel the same way. But I'm just so grateful for these two guys and the way God has superintended, overseen the history of this church. I think we ought to end this service just with an applause to the Lord for his goodness, and I want to do it now, and then we're dismissed. All right, let's take a moment. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Praise the Lord. God bless you. You're dismissed to your connection classes.
Well, made it pretty close.